Hi, my name is Heidi Hubbard, and I'm going to talk about Chapter 5 on global management and cultural diversity. Um, at the opening of the chapter, it discusses globalization and the global economy and kind of how in our day and age, no longer is economy isolated to in individual nations, but they're intrinsically tied up with other nations. So the economy in China will directly affect the economy in Europe and in the United States, and vice versa. And how anymore there are just so many companies and corporations that have gone global, that have taken their kind of home base, wherever their home country would be, and have outsourced to other countries, and how there are global managers who have to manage maybe in a country that is not their own, or their home country, or the country of their residency. And so it was discussed, the chapter, some of the things that it discussed about some of the challenges of globally managing that I found interesting were having to maybe perhaps take on some criticism for outsourcing your jobs. A country on page 115, it discussed how there was, what country was it? Bolivia. How they got a lot of negative feedback because they decided to crunch down on who got their oil, and 82% of their oil they said no other nation could have, and they only gave 12% of the rest of their oil to international businesses. So global managers, they face a lot of negative feedback from their local people in government, because they can be accused of not being patriotic and nationalistic and having a viewpoint that is good for their personal country. Another challenge that managers in globalization might face is making sure that they are aware of the culture that they are going into, making sure that they are aware of how the people, the culture there, their beliefs, their practices, their ideals, their laws, and making sure that the way they operate in those countries does not contradict those values, making sure that they're not offending the people that they are trying to hire to be a part of their corporation. Global business, the textbook talked about just a business that is in another country. It's in more than one place. Global businesses, there are different kinds of global business. There's international businesses, which you may make a product in one country and then sell it to another. There are multinational corporations, which are businesses with that operate in separate countries altogether. And some of just my aha moments from the chapter were some of the discussions on the indiscretions, or the places, the gray areas of global management, such as how do you handle if you're moving to a country that considers things that we would here in America consider to be bribery, but they consider it just goodwill. It's part of their culture that they give gifts and they give incentives. Here in the United States, we would consider that bribery and manipulation. But how do you balance that? Do you say that just because it is considered bribery and manipulation in the United States, that it should also be considered that way there? Do you consider theirs and kind of leave your home practice out completely? How do you balance those things? And so I thought that was a very interesting, conversation that I'd never really even thought that as a global manager you would even have to consider, is how you would handle those situations where one side might see it differently. One culture may see something completely differently than another culture. So overall, I found this whole chapter to be really fascinating. With the silent languages of cultures, I'd never considered that some cultures, like it discusses on page 121 and page 122, there are monochronic cultures and polychronic cultures where like in the United States, we really value time, and we really value being on time, and the saying time is money. And then just the thought of going to a country where it's like, hey, I'm just kidding, I needed to visit my aunt who is sick in the hospital. Sorry, I'm 2 hours late. And they're like, oh yeah, that's totally cool, man. I don't know. That seems really foreign to me. So figuring out how to think in a way that is considerate, that is that takes into account all angles of culture and laws from different countries, and making it work for your corporation in a way that it still runs efficiently and effectively. It was very eye-opening, this whole chapter, and I think it was very good just to see how it works in the big world around us, how people are making global operations work, and it was a really fascinating chapter to me. So yeah, those were some of my aha moments and some of the things that really stood out to me from chapter 5.